What's up, everybody? It's Troy Cartwright. Welcome back to another episode of 10-Year Town. Before we get started, we teased last week that we are getting ready for our first live event, and we would love to tell you about all the details for that as soon as they're finalized. So make sure you are signed up for the 10-Year Town community at 10yeartown.com. We love you. See you soon. Thanks. Today's guest is Kip Moore. You know Kip from his hit songs, Something About a Truck, More Girls Like You, my personal favorite, The Bull. He's got a brand new record coming out February 28th called Solitary Tracks, and we talk about that on this episode, as well as his journey through Nashville and so much more. Kip is a one-of-a-kind artist, and he really does things his way. I know you guys are going to love this conversation, so without further ado, here he is, Kip Moore. Dude, thanks for being here.
Good to be here.
What was I gonna... I had something to say. I can't remember what it was.
I hope.
Anyway, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, man, I always start this thing off with the same question.
Okay.
Which is, how long have you been in town?
Oh, wow. 18, 19 years.
Dang.
Yeah.
Where from?
From South Georgia.
Okay.
I left there when I was 18, left and went to go play a little ball in Alabama, and then transferred back down south for a while. Then I think I moved to Hawaii around when I graduated, around 22, and lived out there kind of in this little hut for $50 a month for a while. And then
That sounds amazing.
Oh man, I still have so many stories that were, I'd hitchhike to the beach every morning. I picked the Big Island because I remembered hearing about Hilo in my world history class.
Okay.
Didn't know anything about it. Truly, bought a one-way ticket and had about $2,000 in my bank account from working a summer job.
Yeah.
After college, and literally bought a one-way ticket. I remember for around like $450, and found this little hut, $50 a month, and I'd be soaking wet every single morning because it was literally a concrete slab. It was 5 by 10 foot. Wow. And I just had a backpack and a surfboard. Yeah. And it would, it just had like a screen from the ceiling to the floor. That's it, just a screen, like just to keep the mosquitoes. Yeah, yeah. But there was no like railing or anything, so it was just a screen. And so it rains. It has the most precipitation per square inch of anywhere in the U.S. where I was in Hilo. And so it's just, it rained every single night. So I'd just be soaking wet, and I'd be like 5 o'clock before the sun comes up. I'm like, well, I'm wide awake. And I would just hitchhike to the beach, and I learned to surf there. Wow. So, yeah.
That's amazing.
And then I moved to Nashville around, I'd say 2005-ish, I was like 22, 23 years old.
Was that like hard to, that's what you're describing in Hawaii sounds like the perfect lifestyle.
Yeah, it was cool. I was a total, hippie, just kind of backpacking around. I would literally hitchhike around the whole island and just get dropped off in different valleys, and I'd camp and surf, and, I always knew that it was going to be, I didn't know that it wouldn't be a permanent stop, but it was like I had no idea what I wanted to do in my life. Yeah. So I was like, I love Point Break. I'd like to go learn how to surf. So I was definitely Utah. I was not Bodie. I was struggling at first.
That's amazing.
But in that time of year too, when I moved out there, it was close to wintertime, so the waves were like jacking up. So it was like learning in a very intense environment, a lot of territorial things going on in the water, fights, and it was wild, man.
It's like a metaphor for life in there somewhere, though.
I had a guy that would probably pick me up 5 different times Great guy. He was super nice, but every time he picked me up, he was a different person. He'd be like, my name's Dave. I'm from so-and-so, and I work the fire department. I'm
the
like,
story was just changing.
You're the same guy that picked me up 2 weeks ago. What do you mean? You said you were a lifeguard at so-and-so, and you were from California, and now you're from another island. It was a different story every time, and then it just became comical because I'd get in the car and be like, well, who's he going to tell me he is today?
What's he got today?
Yeah, what's he got today?
Dang.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So you come to Nashville. Are you like, do you got any clue like what's what, or are you just kind of jumping in?
I mean, I had been doing the bar band scene down in South Georgia in college for 2 straight years where it was, and at that time I was already trying to write a lot of my own music. But as you know, it's like, I knew that I had a knack for it. Like I knew that I felt like I had a knack for words and knowing how to cadence and understanding music and the craft of it. But you get here and there's such a different education to learn. And it's like, there's songs like Everything But You that I kind of started there, so I had the bones of a lot of stuff that ended up becoming big songs for me in my career. But there was so much to learn. I can just remember when I got here, I was just like, oh man, this is another level of, it's like just a different kind of bag, and I kind of, I'll say this just because I don't ever touch on, whatever's happening within the industry or the griping and all these things, but I couldn't help but kind of giggle at that dude, the Oliver dude, when he kind of went off of the day because, talking about songwriters and that, and maybe the craft and the type of songwriter has slipped a hair with people not really understanding the craft of how a song goes. It's you got a lot of people in town like, yeah, that's what's up. Yeah, let's just go with that. And it's like, well, should we go with that? But to say some of the silly ass stuff that he said, I'm like, buddy, go sit in a room with Casey Beathard. Go sit in a room with Brett James. Go sit in a room with Tony Lane, and they will write circles around you.
And they will teach you things about songwriting that you don't even the technicality and skill set that they have to write a song is like so much more advanced than like I could comprehend when I started. Man. Like I remember when I first got signed or whatever, they run you through like the gauntlet of every hit writer in town, and I'm like writing with
trying to keep up with Craig Wiseman going 90 miles an hour and just talking. You're like, what's he even talking about right now?
Yeah. And then you go write with someone like Tony Lane. And even at that time, like I knew nothing, but I could just feel that this guy's like,
he's special.
Yeah.
He's special, and just those guys, I think that's what made me so, I don't usually see anything. Somehow I think one of the guys in my band showed me that whole rant, and I just kind of laughed at it because I was like, this guy's silly as hell, But But I just was thinking about the people that spend their life learning that craft. Nashville's special because of that, and like the Tony Lanes and the people that have spent their whole life dedicated to being great at what they do. Yeah. Yeah. And they should get paid for their services. That's what they've dedicated their whole life to. So it was just, the whole thing was like a clown show to me,
Yeah, it sound like, it feels like a ignorant opinion.
It's just, I could go on and on, but I just was like, what is this even like? It's just the most baseless rant,
It's just like, crazy.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. I've been way off social media, and like somehow I also heard about that.
Yeah.
That's like how much people are talking.
Yeah. I just, it's funny, and then I couldn't help, but it was kind of even like, the game has changed, and I feel like the minority out there a lot of times where we're always live. I mean, we're still using amps, which is like we look like dinosaurs up there right now. Like we're still using old amps on stage, and there's all that kind of noise on the stage and this and that.
Yeah.
And tracks have definitely taken over a lot in the last 5 years. But I've done shows with Parker. And, I've seen his band. They're great, and they're playing. I can sniff that stuff out real quick. He's singing, they're playing.
Yeah.
They're a great band, man. And He's a hell of an artist, man. So, you know, I think more than anything, there's this trend right now where everybody's trying to be so tough and everybody's trying to be like the outlaw and this and that. And then the bloggers all get involved and they all just spew negativity and they pit everybody against each other. And I wish that people just learned how to be themselves. And what I mean by that is like, we're all like these sheep that are influenced by whatever's happening in culture. Like if mainstream media and ESPN, they all just shout and it's all negative and that's what drives everything. So then we all become that.
Right.
And then the bloggers all become that and they know how to pit us all against each other. And it's like, ain't nobody gonna tell me what in the hell to think ever, you know? So it's like, you know, we were on the bus the other night and somebody was, you know, ripping on Coldplay. And I was like, I fucking love Coldplay, man.
Yeah.
Like, and I like Metallica and I like this. And you ain't gonna tell me what I can and can't like. And it's okay to enjoy an eclectic mix of, if you enjoy listening to Tequila by Dan and Shay one second and then you want to listen to Sturgill the next, that's okay.
Yeah.
You're allowed to like that. And what a boring world it would be
if you couldn't.
Everybody's like, well, that's what real this is, you know? And I'm like, well, if everyone was me or everyone was Tyler Childers or everyone was Dan and Shay, whatever it is, it's like, then it would be boring, you know?
Right.
So you're allowed to like Red Dirt Country and then like Somethin poppy and then like Sturgill and like whoever's listening to this, you can be your own human. You don't have to listen to the crowd around you. And like we become influenced by that, so you can see it happening with artists now too. They want to separate themselves from, well, I'm not attached to Nashville or I'm not this or I'm not that. And it's like, just do what you do and shut up.
The, you know, on this podcast, I think just in my life a lot, been thinking a lot about like what is authentic. And I just remember growing up, like same thing that's kind of happening now. Like some band I liked Coldplay. Yeah. And like inevitably some dude in high school is like, well, their older albums were better. Yeah. You know, and and then that would always like affect me.
Which is still subjective. You know?
It's completely subjective, you know, but it would diminish this thing that I like. Yeah. And it would really like, you know, you're just too young to like have the backbone to be your own person. Yeah. To be like, well, I don't really care what you think about it. I dig it. Yeah. You know? It's forming your own opinion. Yeah. And forming your own opinion right now is like so rare. Yeah. Everyone is, it feels like everyone is just espousing opinions. They're like second hand opinions that they got from like a different talking head. 100%. And you can almost, a lot of times when someone tells me something, I immediately am like, oh, I bet they're listening to this podcast or this person. Well, absolutely. You know? And I think that the originality and being able to like form your own opinions right now is more important than ever. And to tie this back, the same thing is true in the craft of songwriting. Like it's easy to sort of get lost in the well, okay, we got to write for this artist because they're the biggest one right now. And when I go into a room and somebody's like, we got to write for whoever, for Morgan Wallen or whatever today, I'm like, dude, no way. Like, let's write the best idea we can find. Yeah. And let's write it the way we know how to write it. And whatever happens to this song, who knows? But if we're not doing that, I don't want to do it.
I think part of the problem and the reason that it's shifted to that though is, you know, there was a time when, let's say, we're not talking about, you know, a century ago. We're talking about when my stuff was popping in 2013, 2012 for the first time. Yeah. It's like songwriters still knew they had a chance at just linking up with fellow songwriters. And there was still that thing where people still bought physical product, and there was still, there was a different kind of income that was going around and the possibilities of tapping into that income. No, so I feel like you had your guys like your Wisemans and your Rivers Rutherford and your, you know, the DePiros, you know, your old school cats that are so great, and they still felt like they had a chance at the three of them getting in a room with three brilliant minds and being like, we'll just write, and then we'll have a chance at getting a Morgan, a Tim McGraw, a Kip, or whoever cut. And cut still meant something.
Yeah.
You know, where the streaming, because record sales have gone away, the physical record sales, and now it's all streaming, and that whole pay system is so effed that it's like they know that they have to link up with an artist that might not even be a writer. He's going to have the credit on the song, but it's like you're taking a Brett James and you're putting him in the room with an artist that's not a writer, and then you got a beat guy. And then it's Brett's the only one that can really write in the room, but then he has to kind of cater to what this guy's saying that might not be a writer. And that's when the quality starts to suffer, because they all have to be fed. They got to get paid. And so I think that's a big problem that I don't know how you eradicate that. I don't know how you fix that. But the plight of a songwriter right now that's just a songwriter, man, I just want to hug all of them and be like, man, I feel for you right now, because you feel it around town, man. There's desperation. And, you know, when I first got to town, I think there was over 1,000 staffed songwriters on Music Row. Over 1,000. And now you've got maybe 150 tops. Maybe. And then you have to be, you know, you got to
get in
man.
You got to get in the camp or the whatever. It's really hard, harder than ever right now, I think, because even getting a cut, it's like, well, what does it mean? You know, and there's a lot of Band-Aids that I feel like everyone's trying to do. I know you've done stuff to try and like kind of like supplement the songwriting thing.
I'm going to try to do that again.
And
it didn't catch like I hoped, but
I mean, I did, like, when I went independent, I started like doing kind of like a little bit of like a revenue share on the master side with the writers and stuff too. And same thing. I'm like, all right, I'm glad I'm doing this. Like, it makes me feel good to do it, you know, because I feel like I'm supporting the community. But it's a weird time right now where like it's very in flux, and I know that the streaming makes everything hard because everything is just so song driven. It's hard to make a record, and even getting on a big record right now doesn't necessarily mean much unless the song is a hit. Whatever that means right now.
If you had a cut, you know, and for anyone watching that doesn't know what that is, just means that it was never sent to radio to be a single. But if you just had a song on the record that was a cut, take Michael Jackson's Thriller record, and I realize that I'm using one of the biggest records ever. But you know, those guys even back then were making $1 million off of those cuts.
Off the mechanicals.
You know, off the mechanicals of those things. It was just a different kind of thing, you know. And it's like, what people don't understand too is that, you know, so many of these writers, you take Dan Couch, that, you know, I've written a lot with, and Dan had been in town for 15 years before he had his first big hit with me.
Dang.
And so you got to think about, like, he's working all these different odd jobs so that he can write in the day, and, you know, not making anything, but dedicating his life's work to his craft. So when 15 years goes by with you making no money, then you have that song. Yes, he deserves to get paid.
No doubt.
You know, he spent so many hours working for that. And it's like, you don't get in this business, and that's why that rent just pissed me off, because it's like, what do any of us do in life for free that we work at? Like, who goes to work for free? You know, it's like, you show up at Home Depot to get paid when you get done with what you're doing that day. You know? Right. And so songwriters sit in a room for 10 hours trying to give something to the world, and they do it again the next day, then the next day, then the next day, and then you go 15 years without anything. And it's like, I mean, it's you're doing what you love, and that's why you moved to town to do it. But you hope that one day you can make a living doing what you love. That's what we're all trying to do, is make a living. It's common sense, man.
It's common sense, and it's craftsmanship. And craftsmanship get paid for. If someone came and, you know, painted your house, which is like a version of it, but to me, songwriting is like if someone came and like custom built shutters for the front of your house, like that's a unique
trade. Craftsmanship.
I
don't want to drive to Boston lugging my semis and my tour buses and all the crew and the gear to not get paid. Like, how does that work?
Doesn't make any sense.
I got a whole team I got to take care of. Like, if the checks aren't coming to play the shows, and I can't take care of people, and that's how anyways.
Well, you've had, I mean, we kind of jumped into like a different tangent here, but I feel like you've had such a interesting career. It's very like inspirational to someone like me, but you've had your huge radio hits, and you've had that ride. And
ended quite a while ago, but
But I think what I admire about your career is, sometimes you get a couple hits, and it's like, cool, let's just do this. Let's just do it again. Let's keep doing it. I feel like you've always been so innovative and moved forward and sort of done these things in a different way, not just with your songs, but I feel like your touring is like feels different than like the standard like country artist touring. It's more of like a rock band. Like you're just going
it is
everywhere.
It's like an old rock and roll tour.
And now you've got this thing like I always see in my like Apple Music for Artists that I'm like getting streamed in like South Africa or something, and I'm like, cool, I should go sometime, I guess. But like you did.
And the South Africa thing is and I'll touch on some of the other things you just said. The South Africa thing, this is a wild story.
Okay.
And how that whole thing happened. And I think that, and I won't go into detail, but it's like, I think that some people I think they thought because I went over there and they just saw the photos, they're like, oh, okay, we can go over there now. It didn't work as well for some, it's.
What do you think made it work for you?
Well, number one, I think there's been a word of mouth going around about the live show and it keeps percolating. We felt something completely different. I mean, I'm 12 years into this career now, as far as like being signed and being on the road full time. And there was a different feather in the air, even on our American fall leg. The whole thing was sold out, and it was chaos in these rooms, and you could feel the electricity was something we've never felt in the States. It was just different. And I feel like there's a backdraft happening for what's happening overseas. But there was a radio programmer, Wimpy, that owns one of the biggest pop and rock stations in South Africa. Kind of stretches through Cape Town, some in like your Johannesburgs and Durbans, and it kind of stretches around that area. Well, in 2021, world was still a little shut down. He says that he was telling me this over coffee because I couldn't understand how I was playing stadiums in South Africa out of nowhere. He said, well, he says that a South African friend of his, another artist, brought the vinyl record of the Wild Ones record to his house and said, you got to hear this. And so he said they sat up, and had whiskey all night listening to that record. And he was like, oh my gosh. And he said, Kip, I fell in love with this record. And it's all I listened to for the next week. And he says, I knew that you were labeled, on Spotify as a country artist when I started digging in. But he's like, I heard so many rock and roll influences throughout that record, which that record was so different than the Up All Night record. And, he said he heard Lipstick and Heart's Desire was the one that he was super passionate about. And I tried to get Heart's Desire to be a single when that record came out. And it was kind of the label's favorite, but they were just like, I don't feel like this will work on country radio and this and that. And, you want to bang your head in the table when you hear it, but he says that he just finally was like, the heck with it. I'm going to throw this on there, and he had said he had tried a couple other times to throw a couple of the big names in the format on a station, and it just didn't catch. And he threw Heart's Desire on, and he said it literally exploded overnight. And his phone line started ringing like the 90s, and it was like everybody was like, what is this? What is this? What is this? So it shot to the top of the chart in a matter of a month, and it was it just stayed there for the longest time. And it's bigger than Truck is here.
That's crazy.
Then he did a deep dive on the records, and I think in between 2021 and like 2023, I mean, we had, there was 11 or 12 songs that had gone top 10 over there that he just was spinning the heck out of the music, and it just all exploded. If I Was Your Lover was massive over there.
Wow.
So there was an audience waiting on me because of this one guy. And then, what happened from that is the shows were so big that then the other stations are like, what's going on here? So then they all start spinning the music, and that's how it just became like a trickle effect.
Yeah.
And that's the power that radio can still have.
Yeah.
I love radio, man. Like, it's like, everybody wants to diss on radio now. Once again, they just follow what everyone says. Well, if bloggers are, shitting on radio, then everybody starts to, well, that's what we got to do now. Screw radio.
Yeah.
It's like, man, I discovered all of my favorite artists on radio. Tom Petty, Springsteen, Alice in Chains, Nirvana. Like, it was, I heard all those records on radio, and like, there's still something so magical about turning on the dial and hearing something. It's different. I love that they're streaming. I love it. I'm not knocking on streaming, but there's just something about driving down the road and something, somebody saying, this is this new artist so-and-so, and you falling in love with a song as you're driving. The radio station, it still holds weight.
Yeah.
I'm just praying that it doesn't get so watered down and contrived feeling like it kind of is right now, and it just feels the maturity of it's lacking.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of like the people that built the format, adults, they feel like there's no place for them to listen right now because
well, and I think too, it's like what you're describing kind of in your this thing that happened in South Africa is sort of like there was like there was one person kind of had the ability to sort of
the station
to put it out there, take a chance. And that's very hard to do right now.
Yes, because it's
controlled.
Controlled.
Controlled. And I think everyone's like also like everyone's just sort of freaked out.
Yeah.
So I feel like when you're playing like from like a more of like a tense spot, if you're just worried about if you're going to keep your job or not.
I get it.
Totally.
I totally get it. But when I first started a radio tour, those guys that were the program directors, they still had some power that they could control some things and they could take chances, and they didn't have to answer to somebody else that's got the same playlist that's in Kentucky, that's in Ohio, that's in, and it's like, I was talking to a radio person the night, and I was like, don't y'all know, and we're friends where I felt I could be open enough. I was like, people are different, not from state to state and country, but county line to county line. Right. So if you don't know your audience, people are very different in the Kentucky holler than they are in Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah.
So why in the hell would you be playing the same playlist?
Yeah.
That's what the programmers and the people that work at that station are supposed to be able to know, is like, what is our audience? It's not the same as Atlanta as it is in Oregon, but you can drive through 5 states and you got the same 10 freaking songs on your whole drive, and I want to drive off the interstate and just run off a bridge. Like, I can't take it anymore. Like, if I hear this song one more time, it's over.
Yeah.
Like, anyways.
Well, I think that philosophically, life is made special by serendipity.
Yes.
And when there is less and less opportunity for serendipity, I'm not just talking about in music. Like, when you go to the movie theater and it's only Marvel movies,
1000%.
it's the same thing. It's like, well, this is why I don't go to the movies anymore, because there's nothing there for me. There used to be, I don't know, like, a smaller to mid-budget movie it's not for everybody. That's the point. And I think that's kind of
Juno.
Dude,
Juno.
I went to Juneau.
Good Will Hunting.
I bet I went to Juneau 9 times in a
So
row.
great.
I went almost every night. It was
So
playing
great.
at like this. We had this independent movie theater called the Angelica in where I grew up in Dallas, and I just loved it. I just kept going back.
Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Yeah.
You know, like that movie blew my mind. And I think there was me and one other person sitting in the theater.
Yeah.
You know, but it was like, man, that movie was life-changing for me.
And now you're going and this is, again, philosophical thing, but like things are just being made for an algorithm. So like I'm watching this show last night on Netflix and it starts off pretty good. It's like a murder mystery. It's like a 6-part miniseries. But by the end, you realize that they just wrote it in a way to touch. That's like, let's get a famous actress. Let's get a person from Bollywood. Let's get a murder mystery. Let's get this other thing. And we'll put all this together and we'll make a Netflix show. And it's not very good.
Yeah.
But because it's not real.
Yeah.
It's written for a committee. And I think that what's happening in music with sort of like everything kind of like country radio is still very important, but you can do so much independently now. I think people are just hungry for something real, for something different.
You know what that's also done is it's made the how do I say this? The hole that you had to climb through, that you had to get through, was so tight for so long, but that was like I think it made the talent level elevated big time. Like you had to have it, man, coming through that thing, you know? And it's like, now it's just like, it's beautiful that it's an open forum.
Yeah.
But now it's also like, it's so watered down with just a bunch of like, what is going on? Like, what are we even singing about? And it's just, you know, you can build a TikTok following and a, you know, Instagram following off these songs that are just like, insane. You know, but I don't, and so it's so flooded with that. And then you have young people listening to that thinking, okay, well, this is what crafted music is. Where when I was a kid, what was in my household, my dad was playing was Jackson Browne and Springsteen and Petty and those guys. And on the radio, you were hearing Fields of Gold by Sting, you know, when in the 90s, you know, and you were hearing, you know, something like Angel Flying Too Close to the Ground on country radio. So the craft was like, holy cow, man. Well, so when I got to town, because that's what inspired me, that's what my bar was. Yeah. Okay, like that's what greatness is, you know? Yeah. But now, because that there is no thing to really fight through, everybody can just put stuff out, and it's just, there's so much stuff. Yeah. And I just think that's how it gets so watered down. And it doesn't even have to be good. It can just kind of, it can just kind of work.
If it gets the numbers, that like it is what it is, you know?
And then they're thrown out on a tour and they've never even done a live show. So it's just like, all right, here we go.
I know. You know? It's crazy, man.
It is.
It's crazy.
It is.
And it just makes the whole thing, you know, it's just different now. I mean, even from the time, you know, I got signed in 2018. Okay. From the time I was only there a short time. I got off in, I think, the very beginning of 22, like January 22. Yeah. But like from the time I was there, the whole thing changed. I kind of came into it with one set of rules. And then by the time after COVID, it was like the game was just completely different. Yeah. And, you know, that's not right or wrong. It's just like, the change happened really fast. And like now it's different. And that like is hard in a lot of ways, but also, I don't know. I find it freeing too. Cause now you can do whatever you want. You want to start a podcast? Yeah. Do you want to go tour?
It's a double-edged sword. There's good and there's great things. There's beautiful things that come with it. And then, you know, there's, you know, what some might consider not so good things that come with it.
What do you think the antidote is to all of it?
But I mean, I don't think it even matter if I did have the answer. So I definitely don't, you know, and I'm just trying to live in that space of, you know, kind of going back to what you said when you were talking about even like the touring, drive you to madness if you're focusing on the landscape and what's happening. And so I've just tried to really isolate my focus to how do I get better at what I do, my craft, writing, and we hustle like crazy. I mean, our sound checks that's where we just really work on what we do as a band. I mean, I don't think I've ever missed. I might have missed 1 or 2 sound checks in my career where, you know, sometimes they're 2 or 3 hours where we're working up new songs, working up transitions constantly, because we don't have any tracks that are segueing us into the next song. And like, we're always trying to find ways to make the show feel so special.
Yeah.
But I also think that's why people keep showing up, you know, and how the overseas thing has been built. Like you said, you know, it's you know, when we first went over there, even to England, you know, our first time, we were the opening act on that big C2C festival. But then we saw a couple different nights where I think London and in maybe Scotland or Dublin, I can't remember, but we noticed that we had the highest CD sales when we were the opening act. So we knew that something had happened during our set.
Yeah.
So then it's just a matter of, okay, now you got to make the investment to go back. And it's not easy, man. You lose a ton of money trying to go back when you're playing clubs.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just so expensive to go over there. And you know that going in, but it's like, I felt like I knew what kind of band we were, and I knew that the audience was a little different than the American audience. They were really locked into what you were saying, and they were locked into the musicianship. I noticed that right away.
Yeah.
You can see at times audiences walking out on things that they don't feel is authentic. They don't care if it's the biggest thing. They'll just be like, all right, we'll catch the next act in an hour or whatever, you know. And you can, it's
because to set the scene, this C2C thing is like, it's like a festival that they do, and they just bring in like a bunch of country acts.
Yes.
So it's like all day.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And that was kind of our introduction into that world. And then I just made it a priority to be like, we're going to go over there and we're going to win these people. And it was just one of those things where I remember the first time we went back was 2016, and we were doing like 600 cap rooms, and I think that whole run was sold out. And I look at it like C2C propped me up for that. Yeah. But then it was, well, it's still going to be up to you to make sure that those 600 people leave and they're like, man, you got to go see this. Yeah. And because I wasn't like I was having radio play over there. So, you know, and that's what we did. We just would strike a match and light a room on fire. And then the next time we went, it'd be 1,500. And the next time it'd be, you know, 2,500. Then it'd be 5,000. Then it would be, you know, we just kept going back and feeding those markets. And then we stretched deep into Europe. And, you know, it's, we'll spend 3 months now next year overseas where I can give America, you know, that break that, you know, because as country artists, you just tour every year in the same places. You're like, they gotta be sick of seeing me, you know? So that way now we can like give the States a proper break, you know, and, you know, only play those markets. You know, I played in New York City for the first time in, you know, 2 or 3 years. So I can give it space and then come back in 2 or 3 years and hit it again.
When did it? So my publisher is Tim Hunzy.
Man,
I did
not know that.
I was talking to him driving in here, and I told him we were talking today. Yeah, and I was like, man, you got any interesting tidbits? And he told me that when you first started, you like had a band and y'all would just go rehearse all the time. So you've kind of always been focused on that. Did you know that was the ticket, or did you just sort of like, is that just like what you loved? Or
I think there's a couple aspects to that. Is number one, the bands that I loved, the artists that I love, man, they were good live. I mean, like you left just going, what did I just see? Yeah. You couldn't wait to see him again, you know? So I think there was a piece of me that wanted to be that. I'm also just like that. Like if I'm maniacal to a sense of like, you know, here pretty soon, I just finished the tour. We've been touring for 9.5 straight months, and I'm about to go surfing for 2 months.
Yeah.
And I'm just a student. Like, I mean, I will sit on the beach and I will watch, sometimes for hours, the really good surfers. All right, where are they getting to their spots? How are they getting to their spots? How are they reading this wave? And I will just work and work and work tirelessly at it. And I just think that's been my innate nature as a kid. Even as a kid, you know, I wouldn't let myself leave the basketball gym after, you know, in college after practice until I hit 25 straight from beyond 15 feet. Like that was just kind of a thing. All right. And then it was like, all right, well, I got to hit 50 straight free throws. Now I got to hit 75 straight free throws. And I wouldn't let myself leave. Sometimes it'd take me 30 minutes. Sometimes it would take 3 hours. But I was just kind of that way. And I've taken the same approach with music. But I also knew that, you know, if you're looking at the history of signed artists, number one, that's few and far between ever get a chance that set out to do music to sign a record deal. Yeah. And then once you do that, what is the life of the artist? It's usually really, really short. You know, you've got a record or two and then you're out, you know, and then it's so I was smart enough to know that my time most likely was very limited. Even coming off the heels of Up All Night, which exploded. Yeah. I never like rested in that. I was like, all right, now I got to make something better than that. But my whole thing was at some point, there's a really good chance that, because everything's about the new shiny toy and country music and the radio and everything. So I knew there was a good chance that statistics would say I'm not going to be Tim McGraw that's just getting radio play for 30 years. Those are few and far between. So I was like, we're going to be the best band out there. That was just kind of my thing, was we're going to put on the best show. And I'm going to just write music that I feel like is honest to me and hopefully keeps carrying me through the ebbs and flows and the lulls of any kind of commercial success. So I was just very in touch with that early on, knowing that, you know, when we were traveling out of my Jeep Cherokee for CAA had us on the road 3 years before I got a record deal. And I can just remember, you know, we were playing and opening for so many people, you know, making peanuts, and we drive all day, and, you know, I get to sell one T-shirt, one hat, you know, and that'd be the gas money, you know, but it was, man, we were all, it's the same band pretty much. We were just all extremely focused on being good at this thing. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
Oh, it's very, very inspiring. I think it's, you know, it's not any different than like applying yourself to whatever you're doing. If it's writing songs, if it's making a record or whatever. I mean, cause you're very involved in your record making process as well. Like I was listening back through a bunch of stuff today. Like, you got a lot of songs that like really speak to me, but like the production on, this is pretty random, but the production on Backseat is is so interesting to me because it's so unique, but it's not what I thought would have it feels like it's a live recording. Yeah. And like the guitar tone and the solo, I don't know. It's just great. I've always loved that.
You know, in that Backseat, you know, that boom, bam, you know, I actually hit when I was doing that riff in the room. I remember I'd pinched like a harmonic and hit it wrong, but I was like, man, that sounds rad, you know. So it was like, then it was trying to recreate that, you know. But yeah, I can remember writing that song very, very clearly with Kiefer Thompson and him being like, well, man, we can't sing. They were Thompson Square and like, we can't go out singing this thing. I was like, I'll sing it all day, and it's been huge for my career. So it just feels so good, man. We did a couple on this record that's coming out in February. We did like literally, I was holding the SM7 like we got, you know, and in the room with the drums, with all of it, all the bleed, and it's just one take as the band, and I'm holding the mic in the room. Yeah. And just, you know,
That's it.
You know, and that's the take. And so there was zero editing, no click, and we did 2 like that on this record. So I just trying different things in the room. So
yeah. Tell me a little bit. So this record comes out in February.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, sometimes talking about music's like dancing about architecture. So.
Yeah. I try not to, you know, it's one of those things too where, as you know, it's one of those things where I write every single morning. It's the first thing I do when I wake up. And, you know, for me, the thing is I finished, so it's a side A, B, C, and D. I've never done anything like this, but it was supposed to just be A and B, 13 songs.
Yeah.
That was the record. But I finished it in August. August, I was done. But the cutoff was late October to get it turned in to have it come out in February. So I was like, man, I got 3 more months and I'm still writing every day. So A and B is a very specific sound and thing. Mm-hmm. And C and D is just an eclectic mix of just, I kind of was just kept writing through some stuff on there. I was like, oh, this is fun. Let's just, because A and B it's not a fun record. I can say it. Like, it's just not.
What is it?
You know, for me, it was I'm not going to even talk about the sonic nature of it because I just want people to discover that for themselves. But it was an unpacking of a lot of things that I'd buried. It was like pulling out the suitcase, unzipping it, and looking at all these notes and things that I had in there, and things I'm not proud of, things that I wish I'd have done differently. I've always got a lot of, when it comes to my dad, I always have so many things that I wish I'd have said and done, but it was a opening that closet at all your demons and the things you've been struggling with, and it was having a talk with all of it, and it was not just closing the door, but making your peace with it, giving myself grace.
Yeah.
Saying I'm sorry, closing the door, and actually walking away and going the other way from it.
Yeah.
Not looking back at it, because I just kept looking back at it, you know. And so that's what A and B was about. But then it's like you get done with that cathartic process, and then it's I'm done with it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm mentally over it, and then it's like, well, now I've got 7 more months until this record comes out. And it's like I'm so far removed from that.
Yeah.
But I'm still stoked it's coming. But I mean, I've already compiled, you know, I'm doing something right now that is so different than what this record's going to be. And I've already got plans to start recording, tracking that this summer. And I'm going to try to get it out in 1 calendar year. So it'll be like, this record comes out in February. Yeah. Next February, there's a whole nother project coming that's just a whole different animal than what's coming now. That's
amazing.
So I'm just like, now I'm completely immersed in that. And my team keeps talking about this record that's coming in February. I'm like, I don't even know that I have a record. It's like, they're going to hate that because they're like, you know, they always want you to talk about the record. But it's like, I'm so excited about it because I do think there's certain songs that I can't wait for the fan base to hear.
Yeah. Well, I think the way that you described it too is just like, so beautiful, and like you use the word catharsis, but it's like sometimes when you do open up the proverbial suitcase of stuff that you haven't looked at in a long time, and you put it away, and like for me, maybe it's the same for you. For me, like putting something away is like I write about it, and I write about it, and then I go, okay, that can go live on this shelf now. Yeah. And what happens to it, I don't get to choose what happens to it, but that's why I have always written songs, is because it's in here. Yeah. And like, if I don't get it out, I start to get really, you know, uncomfortable. Yeah. So that's I don't know. That's cool to hear you kind of describe it that way. One last question for you before we get out of here. If you could go back, give younger you a piece of advice, man, what would you say?
I'm still trying to, like, I think there's things that when I'm 70, I'm going to be wanting to tell myself now. It's almost the same thing, you know.
I can put it this way too. It's like, what's a little like tool or piece of wisdom that you think would just help you on the journey?
You know, I think for me, there would be a few things, but it would be listen to that compass at all times. We've all got a compass. It gets tainted, it gets foggy, it's all those things, but it's always there. And anything that I've ever wrestled with was going against my compass usually. And you wrestle with it and you wrestle with it. And then time goes by, and sometimes you eventually listen to your compass and you react to it and you're like, oh, I'm so glad I did that.
Yeah. But
there's times where you have all this like wreckage, and it's because you didn't listen to your compass. The compass is always right. And I would say, man, give yourself a little bit of grace. I am really, really hard on myself, and I always have been. I know that I'm maniacal about my approach to things, and but I would say those two things, just like being able to give yourself a little bit of grace. Don't be so hard on yourself. It's not that serious. Like, it's just not. Yeah. Like that compass, God gave you that for a reason, and it's normally spot on.
Yeah. And I think one of the things nobody ever tells you when you enter the music business, the big time music business, country music, it is so easy for your compass to get.
Oh, buddy.
Because I just think back to like my initial run through of like getting signed and writing and like, we're going to take this song to radio, and you're going through all of it. Like, you don't even know. You don't know. I had no idea what was going on. And, if I could go back, I would have kind of what you described. It's like, if you're going to go out on your own terms,
yes.
Listen to that thing, do that thing that you're going to die if you don't do it.
Yeah.
Because, you have no clue if it's going to work out.
Yeah. And you'll have a lot of regret if you went against your compass and you went with the crowd and it doesn't, and not just music, but if we're talking about music specifically, for any artists or songwriters, it's like, if you fall from listening to other people, then it's hard to lay your head on the pillow. But if you fall on your own terms, that's part of life. And I can, and it was even like making that Wild Ones record. Like, I knew that I was very fortunate with Universal. Like, man, they were great, man. It was an amazing ride. I love those. I love so many people at that label. I had so much freedom to. That's another misconception. There's a lot of us artists that have a lot of freedom to make whatever we want to make at those labels. Yeah. Some people don't. But they trusted me with writing, and they trusted, the recording process. But I do remember as I was making that Wild Ones record, there was never anybody in the room with me from the label to be like, no, with this, or, so it was just like, I'm just going. Yeah. And when I got done with that thing, I was like, this is going to cause a problem. Lipstick, I think, was the opening track. And I was like, they're going to be like, what did you just do? Yeah. And I can remember the tension in that room when I was playing that thing down. I can just remember like a song would be over and I could see people looking at each other and just going, and it was tense. Yeah. It was not going well, and, but then once they saw the way the fan base galvanized around that record, it was huge for me. It didn't have any commercial hits, but it was probably even bigger than the Up All Night record. Wow. The fan base tripled in size off of that record. Yeah. And then it was like, hey, go do whatever you want to go do. Yeah. And Slow Heart was very different than Wild Ones, so I've been really fortunate I was really fortunate to have a label like that let me kind of carve my own path. That's amazing. It's beautiful. Well, dude, thank you so much. Good to be here, man. I appreciate it. Yeah. That's it. That's the pod. See you later. Hey guys, thank you so much for listening. If you want to submit a question for one of our Q&A episodes, you can do so at tenuretowne.com. We would love it if you would join the Tenure Town community, which just means we'll send you updates via email about stuff we got going on.
And of course, please rate and review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Wherever you listen or watch this thing, we appreciate you so much. See you next week.